We are live. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bad Boss with Anya Soto. And today I'm so excited to be speaking with Dr. Cindy Tsai. She is an award-winning physician, TEDx speaker, best-selling author, entrepreneur, wellness mentor. I can go on and on and on. I love that she is creating a space for physicians to lead in a different way, to be stay in their authenticity, to be aware of their impact. So I am so excited. Thank you so much for saying yes and coming to my show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So behind the scenes, this is my favorite part of I think doing the show. I feel like I need to start recording all the conversations before we get on a show because it gets so juicy and interesting and controversial. And people who have been guests on my show know that sometimes I'm like, okay, we have to end it to go live, but can we keep going? So we're gonna share with you today what we talked about behind the scenes. One of the topics I shared that on Monday I'll be presenting at the Indianapolis HR conference, and the topic that I chose to speak on is how culture fit actually damages your culture. Because I think there was so much hype around, like, okay, what are your values and like who we are, what do we stand for, our mission, and these are the people we hire. And then what happens is it creates this atmosphere of like assimilation, of giving up who you really are. So Dr. Cindy Tsai wanted to speak about a little bit about presence and what creates that leadership presence so that you don't have to change yourself every time you turn around and the environment changes.
Yes,
You want
I'm
to?
so excited to share. And definitely our conversation beforehand was so juicy. And I know we'll
Yeah.
share some of that today. I think it's in terms of being a leader of presence, it really comes down to knowing yourself. And when you're clear on that, you're able to come across as authentic and really being present. And I think today our world is changing and so many things are evolving. And
Mm.
how we were 5, 10 years ago may no longer work today and in the future.
Yes.
And so it's really important to stay connected to who we are and to be okay with being vulnerable and sharing. And I think a big part of that is having a level of self awareness. So, hey, this is uncomfortable. This is new for me. But having the tools and ability to be able to move through that so that you can continue to show up as yourself is key.
Yeah. And we discussed that so many of us didn't have those authentic leaders because that was not the model of leadership. I definitely spent all of my 20s in the legal field being told that home is home, work is work. Like, we don't bring home to work. People don't have feelings, they don't have emotions, they don't, like, you just come to work and you do the work like we're machines. So now we have this new generational, right? We talked about like the generational shift of new leaders coming into work but not having really role models. So, what are
Yes.
you seeing in your environment where it's like, yeah, how do we learn to develop that self awareness if that's not how we were led or managed?
Yes. And I think it's really a commitment to being willing to learn and being open and curious to new ways of doing things. And I think sometimes it can be really uncomfortable to try something new.
Yeah.
And just biologically, our brains are wired for survival. And by survival, it's not like we're being chased by tigers and being eaten by predators, but it's actually everything that we have, what we're used to. Like that's actually what's safety to us. That's what's familiar. That's our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to recognize that, okay, even though I haven't had the leaders who have demonstrated empathy, compassion, I can make a conscious decision now to be open and to bringing in these new skill sets so that I can really support my team in the way that they require in order to have that
Mhm.
great connection and that trust with your team so that everyone can work well together and succeed. So I
Yeah.
think that we each have to take responsibility ourselves
Yeah.
to learn and to be open to growth and being uncomfortable.
And being courageous, I think it also, you touch upon it, takes a lot of courage because our body thinks they are tigers. Like
Yeah.
our nervous system responds just in the same way to imaginary threats, right? Because again, we talked a little bit about our biggest fears, like, yeah, being standing alone, not belonging. So it is hard to, and I talk to these leaders all the time where, and specifically in HR roles, that understand the value of talent development, understand the value of caring about your people, and then having leaders at the top who are saying it's all about profitability and results. Who cares? So that will require a lot of courage to stand up and say, this is not going to work, and being willing to be the only one standing up when everyone else is saying, what are you talking about? We've always done it this way for the past 20 years,
Yeah.
right?
And I think something to just be curious about is just because it's been this way for 20 years, does that make it right?
Yeah.
Does that make it okay? And also, how are things ever going to change if we don't start taking those steps, those
Yeah.
actions to make a difference, to show up differently? You know, we can't just sit here and be waiting for other people to do it.
Yeah.
Because I hear this a lot. They're like, "Oh, well, I'm just one person. I'm just this and that." And like, how is it going
Yeah.
to make an impact? And I really always encourage people to honor that piece in them. The fact that you feel that way, you're not alone.
Yeah.
So much of it is people want to feel seen, heard, and understood, and they want to belong. And until there are other voices, examples, everything is going to stay the same. So
Totally. Yeah.
be
And like,
brave
who's
and
going to take
stand
that
up.
leap? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what you're bringing up to that, yes, the world has changed tremendously. Like since COVID, we are all clear. We're never going back. We're having a lot of conversations, I'm sure, as you are, with our clients that, yeah, the world is becoming more global. We're having remote teams. We understand that we're never going back. What is the hybrid environment is going to look like? And that creates a new set of challenges that leaders have never faced before, building trust and psychological safety virtually, creating teams, high performing cross functional collaborations virtually when they actually never met each other, working with people who have never been in the office. People, we talked a little bit about like the East Coast and the West Coast, even at the right at the
Yes.
size of the US, like never mind working with the team in New Zealand and having your sales team in, like, I don't know, Argentina. It's like just even in the US. So how do you, what would you tell to leaders who are navigating kind of like geographical and cultural changes? How does that presence piece, right, fits in with, I don't know, the cultural differences that we're experiencing?
Yeah, I think I saw this when I was completing medical training because I went to medical school on the East Coast at Dartmouth. And so definitely saw a more traditional, I would say, you know, in terms of medical training back then, it was very hierarchical
Yeah.
and it is evolving and shifting, which is great.
Slowly, very slowly. Yeah.
And when I did rotations on the West Coast, it was really different and interesting to see the more laid back vibe and how people were joking around and all the things. And so it was a very different environment. It definitely felt a lot more safe in terms of psychological safety, being able
Yeah.
to express yourself. And I do think that's more conducive to learning and growth.
Yes.
But I think that we do want to acknowledge this is the reality, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't just put on rose-colored glasses and say, okay, no, everyone gets along and whatever. So I think it's, number one, really being aware that there are stark differences. And I think it's this term I like to use is charitable assumptions. Really knowing that, you know, knowing that everyone is trying their best with
Yeah.
what they have at that point in time, right? I think some leaders who have not been exposed to other types of other, ways of being, understanding what
Yeah.
it's like to be in a psychologically safe environment, it's going to be hard for them to model that for their team.
But I
But
also wonder, would it then be inauthentic to them, right? Because we can say it's like, hey, do it like the West Coast does it. Like we choose to live in California. It's laid back. We're joking, we're laughing. And people who are on the East Coast who have been brought up in that
more
hierarchical
structured. Yeah.
academia, more structured, those are also their family values. It's not just
Yes.
school, right? It's how they were raised. Then would that be inauthentic to them to lead that way?
That's a good question.
Right? Because it's like, how do we find? Because when we talk about presence, it's like, well, we know that that's what's maybe, I don't know, more beneficial, but that's not who we are.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
not how we lead.
Yes. And I think that there is a fine line, right? Because you don't want to be this shapeshifter where you're having to basically force yourself into another form, bend
Yeah.
yourself like a pretzel, right, to fit into your
Mhm.
to your team who maybe is from a different generation or whatever, and feeling like you have to joke around when that's really not you.
Your
So
style. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't think it's about that extreme,
Yeah.
but I think it's really creating this open space for communication and to really be present and curious about this person.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked a little bit about empathy and compassion. And from my experience, kind of like where my expertise lies going and training new managers and inexperienced managers in people management skills, because I see all these companies promoting people based on their results, and they're not often a fit to lead people because they don't like people. They don't want to manage people, they don't like people, but they feel like that is the only way for them to progress in their
Yeah.
career. So we're going to talk about, like, right, the systemically, how systemically we were set up, that the only way for me to progress is get into a leadership role. So you and I talked a little bit about having managers that maybe have not developed that capacity for empathy when it comes to leading teams. And kind of, I asked Dr. Cindy if can it be developed. We kind of dived into a little bit of neuroscience. Can it be developed? And yeah, maybe in your role, how do you identify good leaders?
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely believe it's possible to be developed. Just looking at the science in terms of neuroplasticity, knowing
Yeah.
that our brain is definitely capable of change and developing new skills and shifting all the things. So I think it is possible to develop those qualities. But I think that it does take significant commitment in terms of dedication, understanding, motivation, all of that. And part of it really gets back to what we were talking about earlier, because if this has been your mode of operation
Your
for
whole life.
decades,
Hmm.
that is what's familiar to you,
Yeah.
which means that's what feels safe to your nervous system, to your brain, to your body. And to all of a sudden change that, flip that switch to being this really warm, empathetic, compassionate person when
Again, inauthentic, and people can sniff it.
yes, it's this huge gap, right? And so
Yeah.
it's going to be a process.
Hmm.
And I think that's actually the way to change, right? It's those
Yeah.
little habits, the little shifts that you can do to really gently expand your comfort zone
Yeah.
so that your brain, your nervous system, body doesn't shut down and force you to be like, nope, we're never going there. It's
Yeah.
awful,
I'll
like,
never do that again. I'll never do that again. I'll never do that again. Yeah.
yeah.
And we're
And I think the
living
thing
in,
I
yeah.
like to mention is that I'm sure these people have the best intentions.
Hmm.
But again, it really gets back to we need examples, we need models, right, for people to learn from so that, and in a safe environment for them to
Yeah,
mess up, right? Because
exactly.
it's not going to be perfect.
And that is so key. So and like this feeling safe in a safe environment is key, because here's what I see in my trainings. For the first hour, the way I always design, I teach tools. The second hour is all about practicing with peers. And
Mm,
what I find that we will have about 2 or 3 rounds with feedback where people get to switch partners. And we do that to build that little bit of like competence and confidence. Because what I find, let's say we're teaching them coaching skills, performance coaching skills for leaders. And they're everybody gets it. Yes, everyone got it, all the skills. We put them in breakout rooms and we say, okay, now you're gonna coach each other for the next 7 minutes,
yeah.
and then we're gonna switch. And nothing. They're just like, like the first one is horrible, and we come
Yeah.
back and they're like, oh my god, this is so hard. I
I
thought it
suck
was
at this. Yeah.
easy. I suck at this. They give each other feedback. They go second time, it gets better. They go third time, it gets even better. And by the end of the hour, we're talking about 1 hour, they're like, oh my god, I'm so excited to implement it with my team, because now I have enough memory, right? And that muscle of like the competence of, ooh, like this, I think I can do this. This is
Hmm.
working for me. So I love that safety, creating time to practice with peers, creating safe environment to give each other feedback, and making it okay to fail, okay to make
Yes.
mistakes, okay that, hey, we've never done this before. We all going to be really bad at this. Let's just set the stage. We are
Yes.
going to fail miserably. Do I have your permission to be a really bad coach? Yes.
Yes.
Be the worst coach. Awesome. Let's go.
I love that. And I think it's so important because, especially working with leaders, these are people who are high achievers, who are accomplished, who are
Always.
successful.
Always.
And so when you're bringing them into something new, when you're teaching them a new skill, it's going to be uncomfortable to suck, right? Because they're not used to that. Like, we don't
Being
want, nobody wants,
incompetent,
right?
it's the worst fear. Being incompetent in something, the worst.
Yes,
Yes.
and especially in their regular days,
Yeah.
being so successful and respected and
Yeah.
esteemed, to
Yeah.
suddenly be kind of this beginner again, it's
Yeah.
really uncomfortable.
But this is why it helps to put you with other people who are also incompetent. You're like,
Yeah,
okay,
you're
I'm
not
not the only
alone.
one. I'm not alone being bad at it. We're all bad at it. Yeah. There's that humility in it, right? And shared humanity.
Yes, I
Totally.
think it's so important because a lot of times I find that with leaders, it can just feel very lonely.
Hmm.
And it really is important to have peer groups and
Yeah.
support and community so that you can really connect and be open and share what's actually going on.
I do think we all feel like, oh, everyone is so ahead of me. Everyone already figured it out. Everyone knows how to lead remote teams. I'm the only one who is behind. And I think that's what I love about the work that you and I do, is bringing people together in groups and saying, nobody knows what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. We
Yes.
don't. We're like you said,
We're
we're
all
all just
trying to figure it out.
we're all just doing our best today and tomorrow. And having that, I'm telling you, like my favorite part is in all the DNI work is it just our shared humanity. that we're all struggling, that we're all trying to do better tomorrow, that we're all, I don't know, seeing our imperfections every day and judging ourselves and criticizing ourselves and trying to be better and not feeling comfortable. So, yeah, just another reminder that if you as a leader, here's how I'm going to like bring it back. It's like if you as a leader, can acknowledge that, hey, we're doing something new, the world is changing, we're going to do things maybe differently, we all going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. I listen to podcasts, and we can do hard things.
Mm-hmm.
Glennon Doyle talks a
Yes.
lot about it, and I keep reminding myself, I'm like, I can do hard things, this is going to be hard, I can do hard things.
And one thing that comes up as you're saying this that I like to share when I'm coaching people is you don't have to wait until you feel like doing something to do it.
Yeah.
Because, especially when we're talking about something new, the chances of you wanting to do this is probably very low.
Yeah, like zero. Like, no, why? If I can keep
Right?
operating in my competence, why would I ever put myself in? I have a comment from Sean who said that it's such a great example of what it means to be a giver with regard to assisting others with an overall enhancement within all aspects of life. And thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for sharing. Thanks for joining, Sean.
Yeah, it is. There's something about when you said, we call it generous assumptions. You called it something else.
Charitable
The
assumptions.
charitable
Mhm.
assumptions. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like, can we all agree? If there's one thing you want to take away from this show, which is really hard, that people around me are doing their best. Even when you're like, I can't believe this is someone's best. They should be fired. They're doing their best.
Well, one thing that comes up, what I work with people on a lot of times, is this practice of self compassion.
Oh, yes.
And I really think I've seen it in myself because just being this high achiever, overachiever, recovering perfectionist, I say, um,
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that a lot of times when I'm hard on others, it's because I am super hard on myself.
Yeah.
And as I've learned to integrate and bring in more self compassion, this compassion actually extends to others.
Yeah.
When I
Totally.
know I'm having a hard time, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's okay that, this happened or whatever. And so I think it's really, I really wanted to touch on how important it is to develop self-compassion. And a big part of that is that common humanity thread that you mentioned, right? Knowing that
Yeah.
you're not the only one going through this. We are
Never.
all human, trying our best, going through this experience called life with its
Yeah.
ups and downs.
And always doing something we've never done before. I think
Mhm.
often of parenting and telling my kids, I've never been a mother to a 15-year-old. I don't know how to mother you because you're almost an adult. I can't just take away stuff from you. So it's the same at work. Ideally, right? If you are growing, if you're expanding, if you're optimizing your life, you're doing something you've never done. That's just it. Thank you so much. I feel like, yeah, I'm so grateful you joined me. I want to talk more. If you have any maybe resources that you want to share, please post them in the comments. I'll tag you. I know Dr. Neff, I think, has a self-compassion test that is actually a free tool online.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, if you have any other resources, or maybe, please link to your book. How do we help ourselves to be better, and how do we help others to do their best?
Yeah, I think it's definitely really important to start with ourselves. And
Mhm.
yes, absolutely, there are systemic changes that do need to shift as well. But I think the more you do internally for yourself, it will reflect out
Yeah.
because that's actually what you have control over, right? Yourself. And a lot of times we're trying to control our environment, the circumstances, what other people are going to say and do. And our whole energy is external to us.
Mhm.
and we're no longer present.
Yeah.
And so it's really having exercises, tools, skills, really in the realm of mindfulness, really helping you be present so that you can stay aware and grounded. So no matter what happens, when it's a stressful day, when you're putting out fires, it's okay. You understand, you're like, hey, I'm stressed
Mm.
out. I'm going to bring in some tools to offer myself compassion. I'm going to take some cleansing breaths to de stress. I'm going to go out for a walk. All of these things, it really comes back to yourself. So I'll definitely share
Yeah.
a link to my book. I'm running a workshop on helping female entrepreneurs gain more energy without having to overdose on caffeine. So
Yeah, and wine. Yeah, yes, that's great. And I just wanted to mention you said something about systemic change and kind of making a full circle where you shared that often people feel like, well, I can't do anything. Like I am just alone. And I feel like if everybody has that mentality of giving our power away because as a one person I can't change anything, the systemic change will never happen because we're all waiting here to be like, well, someone has to do something, and it's that someone is often us. It's like you said, you start. I love all the work you're doing. You're connecting with women around you, and collectively we say, you know what, here's how we're going to do this change. And like me as an individual, here's what I'm responsible for. This is what I'm going to take ownership. Because when I think about leadership presence, it really is self-awareness and also being a choice that I create my reality. It is not being
yes,
created. I create my reality. I choose how I show up. I choose who I am. I choose what I do. I choose who I surround myself with. And taking a little bit of that power back and knowing that, yes, you as an individual, even if you're inside organization, can create change and impact. I've seen this done over and over and over. You can start creating change, and there will be other people who will join you.
yes, absolutely. And really, I think it's seeking out the people who are
Allies.
like-minded, your allies, right? And together, you're not, I think a lot of times we feel like we have to do this alone. We're like
Yeah,
going to battle by myself, which of course is
always.
terrifying. Like nobody wants to do
Yeah.
that. And so just recognizing you're not alone. It's been interesting, I think, for me, just really learning, hey, just putting your message out there, being direct, asking for help, support. And there are so many people who are there for you, who want
Yeah.
to be there for you, right?
Yeah.
So really
Uh,
just be bold, be brave.
yeah. And that self awareness, I think for sure, this is when I know I'm in a survival, when I feel like I have to do it alone. Here I am all by myself. I like, to me, that is the sign. It's like, oh, okay, my brain is in the survival mode. Because that's when I go to battle alone versus, as you said, the biggest and the hardest leadership skill. And I've been in this for the last decade, I find is asking for help. The hardest thing ever. But like you said, when I do, there's so many people that are always choosing to show up. And it's such a BS story that I run in my head that I'm alone. It's so untrue. It's like the
It's so
lesson I keep
common.
learning over and over.
Yeah.
So untrue.
And I think one thing I always remind myself is when I feel like I have a hard time is recognizing when I do this, it's also being an example for others.
Exactly. Giving them permission to ask for help.
Exactly. They're like, "Oh, she's doing that. She seems like she has it all together, but she's like doing this." So, it really gives people permission to be who they are and to shine. So really, I
Mhm.
think it's comes back to being grounded in yourself
Yeah.
and taking the action and putting yourself out there and just really appreciating being in the moment and allowing yourself to be seen.
Oh, I love that. What a beautiful ending to this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I walked in with a little bit of like, hey, let's go live. And over our conversation, I got into my own presence and into my own body. So thank you for sharing your knowledge, but also your beautiful energy with us. And I'm sure all the people that will listen to this video will feel that too.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you.